Hello and welcome to my channel Edu at Clinic. And with you, I am Dr. Nelson. Today we are going to have a class on research methodology part 3. This class contains the following things. That means here we are discussing the hypothesis, tools and procedures used as a part of research methodology. First of all, we'll see what a hypothesis is. A hypothesis is a supposition or proposed explanation made on the basis of limited evidence as a starting point for further investigation. So if you want to start any research, the first thing that we need to do is to reach an hypothesis. This hypothesis will be based on our observation or maybe based on the previous studies. So looking into the previous studies, our observations, our reasoning, we come to some hypothesis. It is just a supposition or proposed explanation. That's the explanation that we are going to find, and we are checking whether our hypothesis is just true or false. And we had two types of hypothesis. One we call it the null hypothesis, and the other one is the alternate hypothesis. The alternative hypothesis had two types. There are two types of alternative hypothesis. They are directional hypothesis and also non-directional hypothesis. And let us see what is a null hypothesis and what is an alternative hypothesis. A null hypothesis. What's a null hypothesis? A null hypothesis states that there is no difference between certain characteristics of a population. It states that there is no relationship between measured phenomena. If a significant relationship is found among the variables, the null hypothesis is rejected and an alternate hypothesis is accepted. So this is what a null hypothesis. For example, there will not be a significant difference in emotional intelligence among high and low achievers. So we are stating that there will not be any relationship between the variables that we have selected. There will not be any relationship between the dependent variable and the independent variable. That's a statement that we make. If we make such a type of statement, we call it as a null hypothesis. Here the example we'll read again. There will not be a significant difference in emotional intelligence among high and low achievers. We say that there is no connection, there is no significant difference between them. So here what we are doing is that after the research, if we find a relationship, if we find a significant difference, then what we are doing is we'll reject the null hypothesis and we'll take the alternate hypothesis, and then we'll say whether there is a significant difference is there or not. We accept that alternate hypothesis and the null hypothesis will be rejected. And then what is an alternative hypothesis? Alternative hypothesis, there are two types. One is directional hypothesis and the other one is non-directional hypothesis, and then we'll see what they are. First of all, we'll see what a directional hypothesis is. A directional hypothesis is a prediction made by a researcher regarding a positive or negative change, relationship or difference between two variables of a population. This prediction may be made on the basis of past research, reasoning, personal observation, etc. It is also known as one-tailed test, a test of significance to determine whether there is a relationship between the variables in one direction. Here the direction is predicted. That is, the word directional hypothesis is nothing but a direction is predicted. We state a direction. In the null hypothesis, we don't find any direction. We say that there is no relationship, but there is no significant difference at all. That's the way we do in a null hypothesis. But in a directional hypothesis, we say that there will be a significant difference. There will be a significant difference between the two groups, between these things. So here we take an example. The emotional intelligence of high achievers will be higher than low achievers. That's the directional hypothesis. In directional hypothesis, we are saying that there is a relationship between two variables. And the prediction may be, and how we are making such a prediction is that by going through the past research, through our reasoning, through our personal observation, etc., we come to such a conclusion. And it is also known as a one-tailed test. We determine whether there is a significant relationship between the variables in one direction. That is the directional hypothesis. Here what we are saying is for high achievers, the emotional intelligence will also be high. There is a direction. Or if we say that, we can make another thing. If the emotional intelligence is high, the academic achievement may be lower. So that also shows a direction. So that is what a directional hypothesis. We say that there is a significant relationship, but we also say the direction, how that relationship is. When one is high, the other one may be high. When one is low, the other may be high, or in the other way. So we are stating also the direction that makes a directional hypothesis, and then we'll see what a non-directional hypothesis is. In non-directional hypothesis also, we say that there is a relationship, there is a significant relationship between the variables, but we don't say any directional. We don't say that when one is high, the other one will be low, or when one is low, other will be low. We don't make such a prediction. What we are doing is that we simply say that there will be a significant difference. There will be a significant difference among these variables. We don't say whether the direction. See, in a non-directional hypothesis states that the independent variable will have an effect on the dependent variable, but the direction of the effect is not specified. It is also known as two-tailed hypothesis because that direction may be either in the positive way or in the negative way. When one is high, the other may be high. When one is high, the other may be low. There are so many possibilities. We don't say any possibilities of that. We don't give a specific prediction, specific direction for our relationship. For example, emotional intelligence varies among high and low achievers. Here you see what we are predicting is there will be, it varies. That is the only thing that we are predicting. It varies. Emotional intelligence varies among high and low achievers. We don't say how does it vary. When we say how does it vary, it becomes a directional hypothesis. If we say there is no relationship at all, then it becomes a null hypothesis. That's the difference between these three things. If it is a null hypothesis, we would say that there will not be any significant relationship between the high and low achievers and their emotional intelligence. We say that there will be no significant difference in high emotional intelligence among high and low achievers. But if we come to the directional hypothesis, we say that emotional intelligence will be higher among the high achievers. So we say the direction. We say that there is a relationship, and also we say that there is the direction. When one is high, the other one is high. Or it can be also when one is high, the other one can be low also. That also becomes a directional hypothesis. But in non-directional hypothesis, what we say is that there will be a variation. Here in this case, we say that emotional intelligence varies among high and low achievers. And then we will come to the other important point, that's the tools. Let's see what you mean by tools. Tools are used for data collection to understand behavior and mental process. They include paper pencil questionnaires, computer assisted questionnaires, rating scales, interview schedules, checklists, survey forms, psychological tests, equipments like blood pressure monitors, etc. They all come in the category of tools. So what we use the tools is that it is used for data collection. And what type of data we are collecting, why we are collecting the data, to understand the behavior. So to understand the behavior and also to understand the underlying mental process, we use different types of tests. We call them tools. In some of the tools, as in questionnaires, use different types of measurement scales to collect data. So you see, for every tool there will be measurement scales. See, if you want to measure the height of a particular person, then what we are doing, we are using a measurement scale. We use the centimeters, meters, like that, millimeters. So if you want to measure the length, we'll use the centimeters, millimeters, kilometers, like that. So we are using measurement scale. So we use different measurement scales in different types of tools. As it is, we are trying to understand the behavior and the mental process. It also contains tools, and the tools will also contain some measurement scales, but the measurement scales will be different in the psychological test. We'll see what type of measurement scales are used in the psychological test. Types of data and measurement scales. One is, we call it nominal scale, and the other one is ordinal scale. Then interval scale and also the ratio scale. So these are the four scales that we generally use as a measurement scales in psychological tools. One is nominal scale, ordinal scale, interval scale, and ratio scale. And let us see one by one. We take the nominal scale first. Nominal scale is a qualitative measurement scale. It has no numerical value. For example, gender, sex, marital status, etc. In that case, these numbers, these numerals can't be used for any statistical analysis. For example, when you collect the data, you may be giving 1 for male and 2 for female. Actually, there is nothing we want to, it is they are used there. The numbers 1 and 2 are used just as a symbol. Instead of using the word male, we use 1. Instead of using the word female, we use the number 2. There is no connection between the statistical analysis. It can't be used for the statistical analysis. They are just symbols. So that is what is special about the nominal scale. They are qualitative measurement scales, nothing to do with any quantity. It has no numerical value. And the second one is the ordinal scale. In ordinal scale, information is arranged in a specific order. We rank each parameters or variables in comparison to one another. But the value difference between two variables cannot be calculated. For example, the order of size: small, medium, large, very large. Likert scale is a commonly used ordinal scale. We could see this type ordinal scale in many of the psychological tools, because it is widely used. Likert scale is a widely used scale as an ordinal scale. Because we are using ordinal scale because we can't measure exactly as it is. You think when you are measuring your blood pressure, we can measure your blood pressure. How much is it? Or if you are measuring your height, we could say that your height is 170 centimeters. So exactly we could do that. But in Likert scale, or in an ordinal scale, what we are doing is we are arranging the information in a specific order according to its rank. Let us take an example. There is an item in the test like this. You find uneasy to talk in front of a large audience. That's the test item. And the answers given may be never, rarely, sometimes, many times, or most times, and always. You are given 5 points to mark for that particular item. So this is an example for a Likert scale, a 5-point Likert scale, because we have used 5 points, that is never, rarely, sometimes, most times, and always. So here in a 5-point Likert scale is used, it is used as an ordinal scale because we can't find the difference between never and rarely, and we don't know how much difference is there between rarely and never. We don't know how much the exact difference between sometimes and most times, because the gap between these 2 points we can't just measure. So such type we call it as an ordinal scale. Actually this ordinal scale are not, strictly speaking, it can't be used for statistical analysis, but in psychological tests mostly we use these types of tests, and we use the results for statistical analysis. But strictly speaking it is not allowed, but mostly we use this type of test for statistical analysis. And the other one is the interval scale. Let us see what an interval scale is. It supports statistical tests. It not only shows the order and direction of the variables or parameters, but also the exact difference between the value points. The difference between each value point will be equal. For example, the difference between 10 degrees Celsius and 20 degrees Celsius is the same as that of 30 degrees Celsius and 40 degrees Celsius. Measurements like length, IQ test values, etc. will all come in the interval scale. So here, the exact difference between the value points, we can calculate the exact difference. And the difference between these value points will be always equal. In the last time, in an ordinal scale, we can't find what is the exact difference between the rarely and sometimes. And the difference between rarely and sometimes will be different from sometimes and most times. We can't say that the both value points, the exact difference we can't find. We can't say that each has got some different values, exact point values in between. But here in interval scale, the exact difference between the value points can be calculated, and it will be exact. The difference will be same for each category, and it is used for statistical purposes, for statistical analysis. It can support almost all types of statistical analysis. So that is the difference between an interval scale and an ordinal scale. For example, we have given that if you are measuring the temperature, and we say from 10 degrees Celsius to 20 degrees Celsius, then we could say that that same difference we could find between 20 degrees Celsius and 30 degrees Celsius. So the difference is exact, and that can be calculated. So this is what we call an interval scale. And we had one more type of measurement scale, and we call it the ratio scale. Ratio scale is almost like interval scale, but it has an absolute zero characteristic. For example, height, weight, etc. But not temperature, because 0 degree Celsius doesn't mean it is neither hot nor cold. Doesn't have negative values. Mean, median and mode can be calculated using it. So unlike in the other scale, that is the ordinal scale and also the other one, here it is, there is a zero characteristic. There is an absolute zero characteristic for a ratio scale. It is almost like interval scale, but because there is an exact difference between each value points. But here it also contains the zero characteristic. Here, take for example, when we are taking the temperature, we say from 10 degrees Celsius to 20 degrees Celsius, and then it comes down to 0 degrees Celsius. 0 degrees Celsius means that there is no temperature at all. We can't say that it is neither hot nor cold. It is not the end of the temperature. When the temperature reaches 0 degrees Celsius, we can't say that there is no temperature, it is neither hot or not cold. So, but in the case of height, we could say that when the height is 0 means there is no height at all. So there is a 0 characteristic. So it is almost like interval scale, but it has got the 0 characteristic. And this ratio scale doesn't have a negative values. That is the other special character of ratio scale. And mean, medium and mode can be calculated using a ratio scale. And now we will move on to the reliability and the validity of tools. Till now we have talked about the measurement scales, and now we are moving on to the reliability and validity of the tools. And first of all, we will see what is reliability. Reliability is about the consistency of a measure. It means if we use the same scale multiple times, we should get almost the same result each time. So that's the difference. In reliability, if a test is said to be reliable, if it has some consistency, if you use that same test different times, during multiple times, we should get almost the same result. Then we say that that test is reliable. That means even after the repeated usage, we should get almost the same result. That shows the reliability of the test. And how can we use this in multiple times, in multiple ways? According to that, we have different types of reliability. And now we'll see what are the different types of reliability. The types of reliability are, one is inter-rater reliability. Next one is test-retest reliability. Then we have split half reliability. Then parallel forms. So, and also internal consistency. These are the different types of reliability. These are the different ways that we use to test the reliability of a tool. And let us see one by one. The first one, the inter-rater reliability. In inter-rater reliability, same test is administered to different people who belong to the same population. So what we are doing is, we are using the same test, we are using the same tool to different groups of people who belong to the same population. For example, when you are doing a research on college students, we take a population. So the population is the college students of a particular area. So what we are doing is, we select a certain group of college students in that particular area, locality, and we administer the test to that group. Again, that same test will be used to some other group of students who belong to the same population, and then we will see whether there is any whether the result is has got almost the same result. If it is having got almost the same result, then we could say that the test is reliable, and we call it the inter-rater reliability. Same test is administered to different people who belong to the same population. Then another one is the test-retest. In test-retest, it is getting administered to the same sample during different times. In the previous one, what we are doing is, we are administering the test to different groups of people who belong to the same population. But in test-retest, we are administering the same test to the same sample during different times. We may administer this more than one time to the same sample, the same test. That we call it the test-retest reliability. And the next one is the split half method. In split half method, test items are split into two, and then the result is correlated. The test items, because almost all the items will be measuring the same thing. For example, if you are testing empathy, all the items related to that question will be related to empathy, testing empathy. So what we are doing is, we split the whole test, the whole tool into the whole items into two, and then it is given to the population, to that sample, and the result will be correlated, and then we'll see whether there is any difference. And that is the split half method. And the next one is the parallel form. Here, the sample is given another version of the test and the result is correlated. Tests that measure the same test traits. So in parallel forms means that sample is given another version of the test. So there will be so many types of what we are doing is, if we are measuring emotional intelligence, we prepare a test and we will also make a parallel form. We give a parallel version, another version of the same test, and then we'll see whether there is any difference or not. That's the parallel forms. And the next one is the internal consistency. It is a correlation based on the different items on the same test. Measures whether different items measure the same thing. That is what we are doing in internal consistency. And now we'll come to the validity. What is the validity of a tool? Validity is about the accuracy of a measure. A test is said to be valid if it measures what it intends to measure. What we are going to measure, that should be measured. For example, a test on IQ should measure IQ, and it should not contain items that intends to measure empathy, because empathy is another construct. So what we are going to measure, which construct that we are going to measure, all the test items should be related to that particular construct. It should not include the construct that belongs to some other item, should not contain items that measure some other constructs. So reliability is, a test is said to be valid if it measures what it intends to measure. And we have 4 types of validity. One is the construct validity, the content validity, the phase validity, and criterion validity. And now we'll see one by one each. First we'll see what is a construct validity. A construct is a characteristic that cannot be observed directly. It can be measured through observing the indicators that are associated with it. It ensures that the method of measurement is in line with the construct that one wants to measure. The tool should contain only relevant questions that measure the non-indicators of the construct that one wants to measure. So what we are doing is, you think, for example, when we are measuring emotional intelligence, we have to select the indicators. We can't measure the emotional intelligence directly. We measure the emotional intelligence through some of the indicators. For example, managing relationship, empathy, etc. Those are the indicators which directs and helps us to measure the emotional intelligence. So we list out the indicators. And after listing out the indicators, we have to prepare test items that is related to those particular indicators. So in construct validity, what one should take care of is that each item should be in line with that particular indicator. That means if you are preparing a tool for emotional intelligence and we have taken the indicator empathy, then in that part all the items should contain that empathy part, that indicator. The indicator empathy should be measured in all the test items. So it ensures that the method of measurement is in line with the construct that one wants to measure. Here, what makes the construct validity unique is that it should contain only relevant questions that measure the non-indicators of the construct. For example, we are measuring the emotional intelligence. For emotional intelligence, one of the non-indicators is empathy. So only the test items that is relevant to that empathy should be included in the questionnaire. So only relevant questions that measure the non-indicators of the construct should be included, and only if it is included we could say that it is the construct validity is there. And then we move on to the content validity. It is related to the comprehensiveness in the measurement of the construct. If some aspects are missing or if some irrelevant aspects are added, the validity is at risk. The measurement method must contain all relevant indicators of the construct that you are going to measure. So you should not be getting confused with the construct validity. In construct validity, what we are giving more importance, stress is on the test items. All the test items should be related to the indicator. Here what we say is that the indicators, here we talk about the indicators. So it should contain only relevant indicators. For example, we can't directly measure a construct. So here, for example, we can't directly measure the emotional intelligence. We should go for the indicators like that we have told you earlier, just like empathy, then managing relationships, and the things like that. So what we should do is we should list out the relevant indicators. So by listing out the indicators, we should be careful, and it should include only the relevant one, and irrelevant one should not be included. That also we need to take care of. So a test is said to be having the content validity if it contains all the relevant indicators of the construct, and also if it doesn't contain any irrelevant indicators. So that makes the content validity. For example, if one is measuring IQ, if we leave the reasoning ability or if we add self-confidence in that, the validity will be at risk. For example, here we are taking the IQ test. It is a construct. IQ is a construct, and we are going to measure that construct. For that, we are taking different indicators, just like reasoning, then verbal capacity, like that. Those are some of the indicators that shows the IQ. So what we should do, that we should list out all the relevant indicators, and also we should not include irrelevant ones. Here in this case, we should include reasoning. We should not forget to include the reasoning, but we should not include the irrelevant ones. For example, the self-confidence. So that makes the content valid. And the next one is the face validity. It is a subjective one. Face validity considers how suitable the content of a test seems to be on the surface. It should seem to be. Actually, it is not an objective thing, it is just a subjective assessment. When you look at an IQ test, it should contain all the items should look like as it is measuring the IQ, the construct IQ. It should not contain irrelevant items. For example, it should not contain any questionnaire, anything that measure your self-confidence or something like that. So the test items, when we make a look, on the first look, we should not find that it contains the test items that is related to something else. So that is what we call the face validity. It is a subjective assessment. An example, the items in an IQ test should seem to be measuring IQ. And the last one is the criterion validity. It evaluates the result of your test with that of another test which measures the same thing. Usually a test which is widely used and an established one. The validation is done through correlation of both results. Here what we are doing in a criterion validity is that we take another test. You think you are going to measure a certain construct. Then there will be other tools also available that measure the same construct. So what we are doing is we administer our tool to the sample, and we also administer the established tool to the same sample, and then we make a correlation whether there is a correlation between them or not, or whether there is a no relation between them, and then we see whether there is a criterion validity or not. For example, you prepared an intelligence test and you want to check the criterion validity. So the tool is made by yourself to measure the construct intelligence. Then what you have to do is, then you correlate the results of your sample with the result of Wechsler's scale using the same sample. Wechsler's scale is an established scale tool to measure the intelligence. So to measure the IQ. So what we are doing is we administer both tools to the same sample, and we correlate the results. and then we see whether the criterion validity is there or not. And also we should be aware of the two other terms, that is the internal validity and the external validity. Internal validity refers to the degree of confidence in the causal relationship being tested is trustworthy. It ensures that it is not influenced by other variables or a pure coincidence. So internal validity should make sure that it measures the construct that we are actually measuring. Then external validity is the extent to which the result of a study can be generalized to other samples, situations, area, etc. So here external validity means the result that we have reached through our research can be generalized. If you say that it is true for a high school, for example, if you say that we have made a tool on emotional intelligence, and then we found that it is true for a particular sample, then it should be true for the other samples also who are there in some other area or in some other locality. That is what we call the external validity. And the other one that we want to cover is the procedures. Procedure is nothing but the administration of tools on selected sample, considering the ethical issues, considering time schedule, etc., administering intervention modules if any. So that is, in procedures, what we are going to do is we are going to make a plan. We are going to make a plan on how to implement the tool, the items, the tools, how we are going to administer the tools. And if there is any intervention programs, how we are going to administer the intervention, the time schedule, the ethical issues while administering the test. These all things need to be considered in the procedure part. So let us recollect the things that we have gone through here. The first one we talked about is a hypothesis. In hypothesis, we have talked about two types of them. One is the null hypothesis and the other one is the alternative hypothesis. And in alternative hypothesis, we have got two types of them. One is the directional hypothesis and the other one is the non-directional hypothesis. And also we talked about the tools. And we have made a definition for the tools and why we are using the tools. And also we had talked about the different types of measurement scales, such as the nominal scale, the ordinal scale, the interval scale, and also the ratio scale. And also we have gone through the reliability and the validity. We have gone through different forms of reliability and different forms of validity of a test, and also the procedure part. So thank you for watching. We can have more resources at cyclinic.co.in. So thank you for watching.